Okay. Good morning, everyone. Good morning this morning. I want to greet us. My name is Dr. Ayo Adebawa, and I'm taking ECN 333, Development Economics with Dr. Dele Antonia. So last week, Mommy told me that she had taken you through topics 1 to 4. So I will be taking it from the classical theories of economic growth. So, but by way of introduction, I can see we are up to 33. If you are in the house, I'd like you to just say good morning quickly. You can put on your videos and then you put it up thereafter, just to introduce ourselves. So my own video is on at the moment.
Good morning, sir.
Yes, can I see you just, okay, good morning. I can see Gladys, I can see Shadrach.
Good
morning, sir.
Yes, good morning. I can see Okweyemi and some others. All right,
Good
thank
morning,
you very
sir.
much. So if you, all right, good morning. So if you like, you can put off your video so that the networks can be fine. All right, so let me start by sharing the screen with you. Let me start by sharing my screen. Okay, I want to believe you can see my screen. Can you see my screen?
Not yet, sir.
Yes, sir, we can see it now.
All right, so we'll be looking at the study. You can mute yourself at this moment. You can mute yourself at this moment. Okay. So I want to look at the classical model of economic growth. Please, you can mute yourself at this moment so that we can enjoy the class. Please mute yourself at this moment. Let me try. Let me follow that. Please, can we mute ourselves? Let's mute ourselves. Quite a lot of background noise. Let's move on. Okay, so we want to look at. Can you mute yourself? The man that is making this noise, mute yourself. Hello, please, can you mute yourself? Please, can you mute yourself? I'm trying to mute all participants from this end, but I can't. Please, can you mute yourself?
Now, please, if you can remove them from your own end, please remove them. Please, that's disturbing us.
I believe that Marcel, you are a co-host also. Please, can you do the muting from your end? Because the noise is quite much.
Mute them now, remove them, please.
I'm not a host, neither am I a co-host.
Okay, so let's move on. We want to look at the introduction. So we're talking about the classical theory of economic growth. And that is the major foundation of economics. Please, can the person that is on, can you please let everybody mute themselves? For crying out loud, let's mute ourselves so that we can hear ourselves.
So can we put it together then? It's very good.
So by introduction, we're looking at classical theory of economic growth. And we said that in the realms of economics, the classical model of economic growth stands out as a cornerstone for explaining how economies evolve over time. So we want to look at how economies evolve over time. Please, can I have this person to be muted, please?
Explaining how.
All right. Now we are looking at the introduction. I said
I'll call you back.
in the field of economics, the classical model of economic growth
Hey, Jesus Christ.
Please, can you mute yourself? I can hear a lot of background noise. Can we be responsible enough? Let's mute ourselves so that we can listen to the lectures. Please. All right, so we're looking at the main classical economists. The main classical economists. We said here that the main classical economists, we look at Adam Smith, James Bassett Say, David Ricardo, Thomas Robbins, Malthus, John Stuart, among others. These are some classical economists. And what they came up with is the idea of how an economy grows in the 18th and 19th century. And their theory focuses on the factors that drives economic growth. We're talking about economic growth model. So the classical were the first set of economists that came on board to look at what are those factors that drives economic growth. And they look at the fact that there are some key major issues that are important when you are talking about economic growth. One of them is production. Another one is capital accumulation. And the major one that they mention is technical progress. Technical progress. So how do you ensure that in your production process, you make use of your capital and you make use of the technology or the technical know-how? And these are the major factors of production. They emphasize the impact of labor and land, but they emphasize more of capital and technical progress. So by introduction, I said, according to the model, economic growth is propelled by the interplay of several key factors: labor and capital, 1, savings and investment, 2, and technical progress. Now let's look at the general assumptions of the classical model. We are talking about the classical theory. We are just doing the introduction for today. So what are the general assumptions of the classical model? We have number one, the existence of full employment. The existence of full employment. And what do you mean by full employment? You are referring to the equilibrium between the labor supply and the demand for labor. The equilibrium between the labor supply and the demand for labor. So when you talk about the demand for labor and the supply of labor, what do we mean? We mean for demand for labor, the number of vacant positions, the number of vacant positions that are available. Okay? And then the supply of labor refers to the number of people who are able and willing to work. So when you now combine the two, you can have an equilibrium. So one of the assumptions of the classical theory is that you must have full equilibrium. So we can begin to ask ourselves that in reality, do we have full equilibrium? In Nigeria, do we have full equilibrium? So when you look at this assumption of classical, does it fly? But it is possible to have full equilibrium. But the question is that the case in Nigeria? Now, number two assumption of the classicals, general assumption, is that there is always perfect competition, existence of perfect competition. Most of the classicals, David Ricardo, Adam Smith, A.B. Sales, John Swartz, John Mill, most of them assume that there is always perfect competition. And what do you mean by perfect competition? You are referring to a situation where the prices and the quantities of products are determined by the invisible forces of demand and supply without government intervention. I'd like you to underline that, without government intervention. So what that means is that in reality, or sorry, in the theory, the classicals do not believe that the government must interfere with the price mechanism. They do not believe that the government must determine the prices of goods and services. That the government, the prices of goods and services should be determined by the forces of demand and supply. So we have said the first one, they believe in the existence of free markets. They believe in the existence of perfect competition and full employment. Those are the two. Then let's go to number three. The classical believe in the existence of free markets, which we call free trade. And they believe that the economy should be open. There should be free trade and there should be competition. And this will motivate economic agents to act in their own self-interest. And it results to efficient resource allocation. The question that we should begin to ask ourselves is that when there is free trade, do we have, in reality, do we have efficient resource allocation? Yes, we can have increased investment. Yes, we can have profit generation, but do we have efficient resource allocation? And does this free market situation, does it benefit the society or does it benefit the capitalist? these are some questions that were posed across to the classicals. These were some of the questions that were posed across to the classicals. Now, the other assumptions of the classical, if you look at it, I said there that there is what we call diminishing returns. Diminishing returns. Now, the classical assumes that as you continue to use the factors of production, labor, capital, technological progress, and you continue to add them to production, the marginal productivity of each of these factors of production diminishes. And hence, they posited that sustained economic growth requires ongoing innovation and investment in order to counteract the effect of diminishing returns. So for you to have economic growth with the existence of diminishing returns or the threats of diminishing returns, there must be continuous improvement in the A factor. The A factor there is referring to innovation, ideas, or what will give birth to technological progress. Okay? Though Adam Smith did not give prominence to diminishing returns to productivity of labor, but he also emphasized the role of capital as a subsistence fund, as well as the means of technology change due to the experience that goes with increasing manufacturing of capital goods. So Adam Smith, in his own theory, okay, that we call The Wealth of Nations in his book, he laid the foundation of the classical theory, though he did not give credence to the issue of diminishing returns. But the other proponents of the classical brought about the idea of diminishing returns. Now, apart from this assumption, we also have the idea of comparative advantage. And that is the one that David Ricardo brought in when he began to look at the benefits we get from trade. And he talked about comparative advantage. Let's move on to look at the classical model of economic growth. Just the simple model. Okay, let's look at the simple model. The simple classical model. So the classical believes that growth in the economy increases as the quantity of capital, labor, and innovation. Please change that place to innovation. Innovation. The quantity of capital, labor, and innovation increases. And that we can denote by the equation YT is a function of K subscript T, L subscript T, and D subscript T. Why the YT or Y subscript T is referring to the national output. So we're saying that the national output is a function or is determined by the amount of capital stock. That is the amount of machines that have been put together for production. Then labor force in terms of their effectiveness and efficiency. And then the DT is the amount of land. Well, in the classical traditional theory, land was still accommodated as a factor of production. But as time goes on, by the time we saw solo growth model, and other ones, you discover that the land is now taken over by the A factor, which is the innovation. Okay, so let's move on. The classical believes that the growth in the economy will increase as the quantity of capital, labor, and land increases, where your KT is capital stock. Okay, I've explained this. Hence, the profit is a function of value added from production. I want to explain that. Now, the classical believes that the profit is a function of the value added from production. And the value added is the yield from the capital stock, the labor force, and the land utilization rates, or the land utilized in production. So you can begin to say that, okay, the profit that a country will make from production is a function of the value added that it gets from production. And then we will subtract the wages, the interest, and the land, and the rent, sorry. And these are the rewards for factors of production. So by the time you know the value of what you spend on labor, paying their salaries or wages, and what you spend on machines in terms of the reward you get from it in terms of interest, and the reward from rent, all these are deducted from the value added. And that will now give you, from the profit, and that will now give you the function or the amount of value added. Now, the classical over time now looked at the rising nature of rents. So it says on the next slide that with rising rents, which is RT, over time, the profit will be falling. Because if you continue to pay a whole lot of money on rent, you pay a lot of money on wages, you pay a lot of money in terms of interest, then your profits, pile subscript C, will be falling until it reaches zero. Now, there is something that they brought up from this point, and this is what they call the steady state. At the point when investment and output will stop growing, you know, you've been investing in capital, you have been investing in labor, you have been investing in land. By the time whatever investment you get from them and the outputs that you get reach the optimum or reach the period that is no more growing, then that you call the steady state. And that's the situation where labor and population remains constant. You discover that, okay, what you get from the productivity and the rate of population growth seems to be constant, then that economy is said to have entered the steady state. And this is one of the major reasons why the classical theories were antagonized or criticized. They believe that in a free market, as you have it, existence of perfect competition, how then can you have a steady state? How then can population remain constant? How then can labor productivity remain constant? And this began to become the major reason why the classical theory were attacked. However, a country can initiate a growth process through the external markets. In the reality of it, it is not just internally. We have what we call the external growth model. An external factor can also influence the growth, the economic growth of an economy or of a country. There could also be introduction of new products. Okay? When the economy is made open and you have existence of competition, then there could be introduction of new products. There could also be discovery of new resources. There could be new technological developments, and there could be favorable economic system. So the challenge of an economy entering the steady state and remaining at the steady state can be overcome through the external influences. And that's are the factors we have mentioned. So the existence of external markets, introduction of new products, discovery of new resources, new technological and favorable economic system can help to come out of the steady state. Now, the relevance of the classical economic growth model, despite the criticisms of this model, the prediction of the classical economists proved valid for some less developed countries where technological progress fails to occur and where population expands above subsistence wage level and family planning is not effective. And that can refer to countries like Nigeria. We are not technologically progressing as we ought to, and population is still expanding, and labor are not paid above subsistence wage level. And family planning to an extent may not have been effective. However, the prediction of the classical models in terms of providing a basis where economic growth can be achieved cannot be thrown abroad. So the classical model offers a framework for understanding the dynamics of economic growth and development in developed and less developed countries. Now, let's look briefly at the reasons why classical growth model failed to predict economic growth in some countries. Now, this is very critical and very important that you take note of this. Number one reason, as I've emphasized before, is the fallacy of the steady state. The fallacy of the steady state of the economy. Now, the fallacy of the steady state is saying that, is there any time that national income can be zero? Is there any time that population can remain constant? Is there any time that labor productivity can remain constant? Is there any time that there will be no productivity in an economy? And if that happens, how long can an economy remain in the steady state? Now, we also have another reason why the classical theory failed, and that is the issue of increasing wage rates above subsistence level without bringing about corresponding growth in production and labor supply. So when we begin to advocate for rise in minimum wage, is it actually the solution? That is one of the criticisms that, okay, if we say we want to continue to increase the wage rate above subsistence level, has this resulted to increase in growth, economic growth, through population and labor supply? The higher the labor supply, has it resulted into higher productivity despite increasing wage rates? That's a question to discuss. Then another criticism is the issue of diminishing returns to labor and capital. This was not taken into consideration in the long run, as expected that land has been put to various productive use with the aid of technology. There will be a time of diminishing returns to labor and capital. I'll soon be rounding up, so we'll use about the rest of the period to discuss further classical theory. Today's class is just an introduction to the classical theory, the general introduction to the classical theory. So thereafter, we'll be taking the classical theory one after the other. Rostow's theory, solo growth model, and so on. We'll start taking them, and the neoclassical theory as time goes on. Now, the issue of diminishing returns to labor and capital have also not been taken into consideration, and this also will happen in the long run. It will happen in the long run. So, to what extent have we considered the continuous usage of the land and the continuous usage of other factors of production when we are considering the impact it has on economic growth? So before the conclusion, I'd like to also mention some of the classical theories and what they stand for. So quickly, before we look at the conclusion, let me read or let me discuss the key classical theories. The key classical theories. So you can note them down. You can note them down on your notes. Number one, we have Adam Smith. Many of us have had, and many of us have read a bit of Adam Smith. He has been described as the father of modern economics, and he wrote the book, The Wealth of Nations, in 1776. I was not born then. And one of the major things that he laid down is to give us the basis of, or the foundation for the classical economic theory, how an economy can grow inward. And he brought so many theories up. We have the absolute cost advantage in the area of international trade. Another key classical theorist is David Ricardo. David Ricardo, a British economist, he built on Adam Smith's idea, and he developed the theory of comparative cost advantage. The major challenge with these theories are their assumptions. So at any time you are assessing or critiquing a theory or a model, you look at the assumptions and the applicability of these assumptions to developing and develop economies. So you look at their relevance in that regard. We also have another key theories of the classicals, which is Thomas Malthus. Thomas Malthus was an English economist and a demographer, and he is known for the theory of population growth. And he is the one that brought about the theory that the economy should be growing at arithmetic progression, while food production and food
Just like
security
by lecture.
should be growing at geometric progression. When you say geometric progression, is when you are talking about 2, 4, 8, 16, and so on. So that in the long run, the food productivity can take care of the growing population. Now, we also have John Stuart Mill, and he also is a British philosopher and economist, and he brought in the idea of political economy, and he gave also his own input into how an economy can grow internally through good governance. Now, the classical theories of economic growth, we have the summary of it, as I've said. We have the idea of division of labor by Adam Smith, free markets, comparative advantage, population growth, and accumulation of capital. Another thing that I like us to take note before we conclude is the idea of income inequality. The classical theory also failed to acknowledge the issue of income inequality, and that affects so much the developing economy. Income inequality in the developing economy and social justice. Because when we are talking about economic growth and you don't consider the gap between the rich and the poor, then there is an issue of income inequality. And therefore, all the assumptions may not be relevant when there are income inequality. Also, the classical theory fails to account for externalities. They believe that the economy can always grow internally once it takes care of those factors that they identify: technological progress, capital accumulation, and free markets, full employment, and so on. But they fail to realize that there are also externalities. Externalities in the area of environmental degradation. This affects climate change. This affects productivity and economic growth. Social costs. All this will affect productivity. So in conclusion, we can say that the classical theories gave an important achievement in the area of recognizing that accumulation and productive investment of an economy is the main driving force behind economic growth. And that we can't take away from them. We can't take that away. Economic can be achieved by accumulation and productive investment of an economy. How you make use of capital productively, and how all other factors of production are invested for productivity sake. So I will give room for us to discuss. This is about 9:10 or 9:11. So I'm going to allow us to discuss few things before we round up. So under capitalism, this takes the form of mainly this takes the form of mainly the product reinvestment of profits, mainly the private sector and those who have the means of production that uses those production and makes the economy grow. So he relegated the government and he does not believe in the role of the government. But in reality, we also discovered that many developing economies still develop through the government sector. All right, thank you very much. I'm going to stop the slide share now so that we can discuss further. All right, we can discuss further. Okay. All right, so thank you. I want to give room for us to discuss now. We're about 108 in the class. So can we talk now about the introduction? We have just looked at the classical theory. So Marcel, your hand is up, then followed by Lidwin. So your hands are up. Marcel, you have the floor, the governor.
Good morning, sir.
Yes, good morning.
So I have a question. Okay, I think a question and an appeal. My question is, we spoke about the general assumptions of the classical theories, and now there are like a number of classical theories. So I want to understand if all these theories share those general assumptions you outlined.
Yes.
And then I wanted to.
Okay, go on. You are
and then I wanted to ask you if we can get the slide after the class because it was very rowdy. We couldn't pay attention.
Yes. I will send the slides to you.
All right, thank you.
After the class. Yes, very correct. The general assumptions cut across most of them, apart from diminishing returns, and that is the only one that may not be agreeable to Adam Smith and some other classicals, but all other assumptions cut across all the classicals. All right. Lidwin.
Good morning, sir.
Lidwin. Odion, yes. Good morning.
Yes, sir. You said Thomas Monton is known for population growth.
Malthus.
Okay.
Malthus.
Okay, you said it's known for population growth. Also, you said I didn't get the other one you said that was responsible for political economy.
Okay, that I talked about John Stuart Mill. He talks about the principles of political economy, and that's what he worked upon. So he's looking at the impact of governments and good governance on economic growth.
Okay, sir.
All right. Gbadebo Lawal.
Sir, good morning, sir.
Good morning.
My own question is that based on this classical theory that we are talking about, we have various economists who give out their own assumption as regards to classical as regards to the theory of assumption. But my own idea is that this assumption that we are talking about, how can we relate it? When maybe we encounter such questions on the exam, how can we be able to relate it, or how can we relate it in the exam, or how is the importance of this assumption? So that is what I want a clarification on.
Yes, that's a very good one, and that's the area that we should begin to think of. So when you look at these assumptions, if you listen carefully to when I started, if not for the rowdiness of the class initially, I'm trying to say that some of those assumptions might not work with developing economies. So you need to understand those assumptions and now critique the assumptions. So when you want to talk about the criticism of any of those theory, you look at the assumption. So based on the assumptions, you can now look at it. Is it relevant to developing economy or develop economy or emerging economy? Is it also realistic in developing economy, or is it realistic to developed economy? For instance, we pick the idea of full employment. That is one of the general assumptions of classical, that, oh, there will always be full employment and there is no need for government intervention. So, Lawal, I want you to discuss full employment as to Nigerian situation. Do we have full employment? If you understand what is full employment. So if the classical are saying that, oh, economy will grow, there will be economic growth by the basis of the assumption that there will always be full employment and there will always be equilibrium in the labor market, where you will have demand for labor equating to supply of labor. So I want you to discuss this quickly.
Fún wọn 1,000 nígbà tí mẹ́ta bá jẹ́ 100 naira ẹ mọye tó máa wà nù ẹ̀.
This woman no dey
just a
Like, I don't understand. Ó ṣẹ̀ṣẹ̀ kó wọn gba lecture. Ẹ máa disturb mi bẹ́ẹ̀ náà ni Kẹ́hìndé yí gbogbo fóònù ẹ̀ sókè lẹ́ẹ̀kan.
Lecture all don't disturb everybody.
disturbing the class.
Madam Deborah, wetin happen now? Lecture disturb everybody.
You are disturbing the class. Yeah, Deborah.
Mommy, please.
I swear this woman no dey listen to anybody here.
Somebody to remove her now.
Yes, yes. Like us. Yes. Everybody is on it. This one's a tough one. You should leave the view first and something like that. What a minute. Mama, but if you buy shit, now it's not the sound. I never so you can hear it. No, it's my stand. Oh, no. The thing show mic big. Yeah, this the mic. So, sure, Rishi. I thought she don't know. Sure, Rishi. Ṣé kò mọ nǹkan tó máa ṣe síbẹ̀? No, but bá ti ṣe but wọ́n ṣáà sọ̀rọ̀. Wọ́n sọ̀rọ̀ like àti the mic ṣé ẹ lọ tẹ̀ pọ̀? Mi mọ nǹkan tí mo tẹ̀ bí wọ́n mo tẹ̀ pọ̀. Microphone àti àti ṣe pọ̀. Kò wá sọ̀rọ̀ mọ́. Èyí náà dà wọ́n máa ń bá sọ̀rọ̀. Ṣé wọn ò bá yín ìgbà tó gbé bọ́tà wọn kíláàsì sọ̀rọ̀ mọ́? Yes. Ìgbà tó gbé bọ́tà ṣáà kíláàsì sọ̀rọ̀. Mi ò mọ̀ bóyá wọ́n gbọ́ voice mi o. Gbọ́ ó dà pé wọ́n gbọ́ torí wọ́n send message kan wọ́n máa ń rí pé ata she don unmute herself. She don unmute. Unmute. Ṣé ìgbà tó fi gbé bọ́tà wọn sọ̀rọ̀ rí gbàgbà pé fúláwò fẹ́ pa fúnni? Torí ìgbà tó ń
Tell your mom to mute herself. Let her just mute. She should off her mic. She will listen to everything that will be said. Just they disturb things.
Tell mommy to leave
Deborah,
the class.
please mute yourself. What does it does not concern us? Kindly mute yourself. It doesn't make sense anymore.
Mommy, leave the class.
Hello? Hello? Hello?
We can hear you,
We
sir.
can hear you, sir.
Sorry, I was logged out by network and I had to sort it out quickly. Now, I think Lawal was asking a question, and I'm trying
Yes,
to
sir.
say
Yes.
that you look at the assumptions and you look at the assumptions of the classical and the relevance to either developing or developed economies. Now, one of the assumptions of the classical is the fact that there is always full employment and equilibrium in the labor market. And I was asking that, okay, let him discuss it, or let us discuss it. In Nigerian economy as of today, do we have full equilibrium in the labor market? Do we have full equilibrium in the product market, in the stock market? Where do we have it? So is that assumption, is it relevant to Nigeria? So let me hear one or two. Let me hear one or two. So Lawal, can you speak maybe
Okay,
on
sir.
that? Is that assumption relevant to Nigeria?
To me, is I can say that.
I can't hear you well.
Can you hear me, sir?
Okay, partially.
I can say that partially is the assumption is relevant, because if you look at it now, if you look at Nigeria as a whole, there are places that does not there is not enough unemployment, and there are some places that there is unemployment. So it's to me, I can say that there is no much unemployment where it stands, because we have people outside there who are looking for place to work, and there is no provision for them. So to me, I see the idea of that assumption, to Nigeria, is not relevant enough. Yes, it's not relevant because there is no unemployment around. People cannot get a work to do, here and there. So the opportunity that is left is only strictly for the rich people. So why the average man find it difficult to get a job or employment in the workplace. So that's where I see, sir.
Okay. So I think Lawal is trying to say there is unemployment around, because I heard you say there is no unemployment around. That means that you are saying that there is enough employment. Okay. Yes. Any other? Olajumoke? Yes, your hand is up.
Yes, good morning, sir.
Yeah,
Actually,
good
mine
morning.
is not a question, but a request. Please, could you make Marcel, our class rep, a call admin in your subsequent class so that he can remove those who are disturbing the class? Thank you.
Okay, yes, I initially even told Marcel to be the host and probably make me the co-host. Reason is I am not having the Zoom, what's it called now? The Zoom license. I'm not from Unilag, I'm in Yabatek, but I'm an adjunct lecturer in Unilag. So Dr. Deleye now this morning, after Marcel has sent, also sent me a link. So I guess as much, maybe she might want to be in the class. So I didn't want us not to use our link. So eventually we used the link that was sent by Dr. Deleye. So I guess she was still the admin, she was still the host there. So maybe that's why I couldn't have access to control it from my end. But all the same, subsequently I will discuss with her if the class governors have a Zoom license from DLI, then it's okay. We can just use that of the governor, so that Marcel will be a co-host with me so that those things can be checkmated. All right, that's noted.
Thank you,
Jumoke.
sir.
All right. Any other question? Okay.
Hello, sir.
I'm going to send the slides to us through Marcel, and I'm going to also send us the subsequent slides, maybe the one for next lecture, so that we can read along. And then I probably will later discuss that with Marcel, if we can have a WhatsApp group, so that once in a while I can also send us some useful materials in the course of the lectures and the semester. All right, thank you very much for your patience. I could still see, let me check the number, 65. Well, out of one, I saw 108 initially, but maybe the network issue. Thank you very much for the patience. So have a blessed weekend ahead. All right. Okay, thank you, everyone.
Thank you, sir.
Thank God.